You're listening to a podcast hosted on the Podcast Matrix. Get your entire podcast library hosted now at whatisthepodcastmatrix.com.
Are you troubled by pop culture references you don't understand?
Does trying to figure out a good jumping on point in a long-running comic series keep you up at night?
Have you or your friends or family seen a comic book-based movie, TV show, or cartoon and not known what was going on?
If the answer is yes, then this is the podcast for you.
My Big Fat Pull List. Our assembly of knowledgeable hosts are eager to help answer all your comic book-based pop culture questions. We're ready to geek out with you!
Alternate realities, parallel universes, infinite multiverses. These things have become a staple of the modern-day superhero comic book story. With series like DC Elseworlds and Marvel's What If, readers get the opportunity to see their favorite heroes, stories, and events play out differently than they had seen before. Questions can be asked, such as,
What if Mr. X had never read an X-Man comic?
What if Pistol Danger had become a pacifist?
or
What if Smurphy had joined the military?
join the Geeks as they get a visit from Dr. Impact and dive into a few of the multiple worlds along the cosmic interdimensional highway during Elseworlds and What Ifs, here on My Big Fat Pull List.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to My Big Fat Pull List. I am one of your hosts, Mr. X. Across the table from me tonight, we've got
Pistol Danger.
Smurphy.
and the illustrious Dr. Impact. First official episode on the podcast. Welcome, Dr. Impact.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
First
for
first
being
regular season episode,
First
I guess,
regular
right?
season, yes. You were teased in our giant size
Yeah.
annual.
So for the collectors out there, the first appearance is actually in the giant size
And the
annual.
giant size annual, first appearance, Dr. Impact. Look it up.
One of the
Near
few
mint.
that matters nowadays.
That's
sorry.
right. Our
true.
annuals will matter to us.
And hopefully
maybe,
to you.
and maybe one or two listeners. Today, I'm super excited about this episode because it deals with what ifs and other timelines and other universes. These comic books, the what ifs from Marvel and the Elseworlds from DC, allow us as readers to finally get those questions answered. You know, what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four? Or what if Superman's pod had landed in Mother Russia?
My God, is that a thing?
These are huge questions that fanboys have, and thankfully they have answers. And we're going to get to those on this episode of My Big Fat Pull List. DC presents Imaginary Stories.
We're all big comic fans, obviously, which is why we're here. We've probably all read What Ifs and Elseworlds and
I've got a
that
couple in the
such.
collection
Yeah.
right over there.
Best one.
In trying to figure all of this stuff out, I discovered that these things actually started back in the 40s.
Really?
Yeah.
I wasn't even born back then.
No, none of us were, even me. The alternate reality, imaginary stories idea, the What Ifs and Elseworlds, actually starts in 1942 with Superman number 19. They did a story in Superman number 19 called Superman Matinee Idol. And you guys have seen the old Max Fleischer cartoons, right?
Yes.
In this story, apparently, it is a world where there are actually Max Fleischer Superman cartoons. And Lois decides, well, this is a perfect opportunity to find out Superman's secret identity. I'll go to the movies and watch these cartoons, and eventually I'll see what his secret identity is.
Genius.
Right.
That's brilliant detective and reporting work right
Yeah,
there.
that's that 1942 brilliant writing for you.
I think she's Batman.
I think so, yeah. Batwoman.
Batwoman, yeah.
Batwoman,
Batwoman,
yes.
come on.
Please, don't
Sorry.
assume.
PC world.
Whoa.
We get enough mail about Pistol as it is.
Bat person. Bat person,
Bat-
please.
Bat person.
Bat
There you
person.
go. There you go. So basically, it opens with Lois determining to find Superman's secret identity. So she goes to the theater and watches the Mad Scientist cartoon. While she is there, Clark goes with her, and he starts to wonder if people are maybe clairvoyant or something, and how do they know that he is Superman? And eventually, it all gets thrown out as, oh, well, this is just fiction, and we've all made this up for interesting stories, and of course it ends with Superman, winking at the last panel. So that's actually where What Ifs and Elseworlds starts, is right there in Superman number 19. Now, that story was later reprinted, I found out, in Superman 183 in 1966 under a different title. And this time it was called Superman Cartoon Hero. When it was reprinted in this issue, it had a new blurb that was put on the top. It was like this big yellow circle that says, "Our very first imaginary story." And that's,
retconning real life.
Retconning all the way back then,
Okay.
So that's where they coined the phrase imaginary stories, is with that. And DC decided to do quite a few. If you look it up, there's actually a ton of what DC called imaginary stories. And they apparently that was an actual term that was used at the time, was imaginary stories. There were Batman, Superman, World's Finest, and then I think there were one or two in like Flash and Aquaman and things like that used the same kind of story techniques as an imaginary story would use, but aren't necessarily typically imaginary stories.
Yeah.
The thing that is most interesting, you guys have read What Ifs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hostess pastries, love them.
Well, the What If
best What
pastry?
Ifs. Yeah, the Hostess pastry comics. One pages.
Oh, yes, that's right. I guess that's technically a What If, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that technically means Meatloaf is a part of the Marvel Universe.
If Al
Well,
Gore can be, so can he.
somewhere in some alternate reality. Yeah, no, the imaginary stories in their ideas, they had a term back then called gyps. They didn't want these stories to be gyps. And what a gyp is exactly what you think, like you're getting gypped out of something.
This story doesn't mean anything.
No, well, these stories do, is what they're saying. The gyps are things where it's rewriting history, or somebody gets turned into a monkey, and then by the end of it, they go back in time and change things, and now that person never got turned into a monkey, or whatever the hell the crazy story is. These things end up not actually happening because they are dreams or they change history. Those
They're
are
imaginary
gyps.
stories. They're
They're-
gyps.
Those are gyps.
Early
well,
flashpoints.
Sort of. These were not gyps. These were self-contained stories. They just didn't happen within the continuity, whatever loose continuity DC Comics had at the time. And it allowed them to tell stories that would kind of push the boundaries a little bit, and they could, they could let evil win in these imaginary stories. And as long as they put the imaginary story thing on it, they didn't get slapped by Comics Code or censors or anything like that, because they were not part of regular comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were not, like, main canon is what's real, but other continuity, that's open to interpretation.
Right. So it
Silly.
it starts back then, not quite as interesting as some of the ones that we had later, but
True. You also have to realize back then there weren't as many comic books being published. Or there were a lot of comics being published, not titles being published.
Certainly not a lot of superhero
Right.
stuff.
Not like it is today.
Yeah.
And I would argue that there were less superheroes because they were more focused in at the time on who they had, rather than throwing Spider-Gwens and Gwenpools and Gwenums against the wall.
Do you have like a beef against Spider-Gwen and Gwenpool and
actually-
Gwenum? And
Don't over the
do you
can of
have a
worms.
problem with Gwen?
Do we
Don't-
need to
nope.
Do we
have
have
a
to-
conversation?
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
is there
hold
something?
on.
What
I
did
think we need
Gwen
to have a
Stacy
podcast.
ever do to you, Pistol? That
She died on me.
oh, okay.
She up and quit her life.
Well,
She
I have a
didn't
book
die.
for you. We will talk about later.
She was actually
Oh yes,
Foreshadowing, you say?
foreshadowing.
I mean, Wolva Gwen is the best book so far.
She didn't die. She was killed. Thank you very much.
Death comes to all of us. How you determine it and how you define it doesn't matter. It's a permanent seizure of life.
What?
I think you just blew Smurphy's brain.
That's not hard.
Shut down. No.
I can give him a balloon and it's the
Yep.
same thing.
Shut
Blew
down.
something.
Yep. I'm gonna restart.
I
It's
love it when
literally in our
somebody
title.
can come on, whether it be one of us or a guest host like we have with Dr. Impact here. I love it when somebody can teach us something.
Right.
Not only just the listeners, but actually teach us something. I find this very fascinating. I want to know more.
I've got lots of knowledge to drop on you. In fact, even more stuff about the imaginary stories era. some of that stuff has stories that you guys probably know from, I don't know when everybody started reading and getting into comics, but you guys all know the Superman Red, Superman Blue stuff from the 90s, right?
Yes.
When he was the two electrical...
the two electrical beings.
Right.
Really stupid.
That actually felt stupid because it's actually an idea from the early 60s. When you think of it that way, taking an old idea from the early 60s and translating it to what was then modern day, it was actually pretty brilliant writing on their part. But the idea actually originates in a story, a one-issue story called Superman Red, Superman Blue in Superman number 162 in 1963, which was, here's a name for you. I've never heard of this guy's name before. Maybe that's a shame on me. I don't know. But written by a man named Leo Dorfman, with art by the legendary Kurt Swan.
Well, I know Swan.
So, and in this story, Superman, he has to try to, he needs to finish everything that he wants to take care of in the world, but there's just not enough time, and so he wants to particularly help the Bottle City Kandor and enlarge them. And so in order to do all of this, he uses this machine that will, I forget what kind of kryptonite it uses, but it's various, I don't know, polka-dotted purple clear kryptonite or something, I don't know, that powers this machine that's supposed to give him the ability to do all this. And what it does is it splits him into two beings, one in a fully red suit and one in a fully blue suit. So it's a really...
But is that it?
From what I understand, that's
He's
it.
exactly
I've never...
the same dude, except
Yes.
one suit is red, all
Yes.
red, and one suit is all
and
blue.
there's two Supermans that can take
they-
care of things.
Are they electricity based?
No.
Okay.
That was
No.
something that was added.
That
for
was something in the 90s.
Yeah.
storyline.
So if you think about it, the 90s storyline is kind of a remake. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that they don't do, I guess they're starting to do a few more remakes now in comics, but remake is kind of a weird term in comics.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the Electric Blue Superman and Electric Red Superman, that's kind of a remake of an imaginary story.
Huh.
You can't spell remake without lazy, so yeah. Go for it.
In most cases. Yeah, they had all kinds of imaginary stories, though. There were things like Superman and Batman brothers. In this,
Okay.
In this imaginary story, John and Martha Kent are taken aback by the news of the recently orphaned Bruce Wayne, and so they adopt him. And
figure that.
he's-
The poor
yes,
country folk adopt
the
the
millionaire
millionaire
boy.
child from Gotham City.
It doesn't matter they're not anywhere located near each other on a
Yeah.
map.
No, yeah.
But no, that's cool. Like, oh,
Well,
hey,
it
yeah, we'll
depends.
adopt
That depends on what reality you're talking
Yeah,
about.
this is
Some
an
of them they're
imaginary
very
world.
close.
That's
And in this one, the
That's
Kents
true.
are
Good call.
hashtag
No, good call.
blessed.
Right.
yeah.
Hashtag blessed.
So Clark and Bruce grow up together and become Batman and Superman together as crime-fighting adopted stepbrothers of sorts. I get the top bunk.
Is Bruce actually still a millionaire in this? Like,
He is.
Okay.
He is. In fact, from what I found,
So the Kents aren't millionaires. Bruce
But
is.
Bruce is.
Bruce has the money, and they're
He's-
like, hey, humble boy, here's your oats. And he's like, no. I have my lunch catered.
Yeah. Alfred, please.
in fact, what I have learned is that he brings after a number of years, he brings the family to live at Wayne Manor. He's like, we're not living on this farm anymore. We're going to go live at my house.
What an
Ma
awesome
and Paul
story.
Kent would never leave the farm.
This story is Swiss cheese. There's just holes
Well,
everywhere.
well, and then the end. Keep in mind, this is 1967, so this is a pretty crazy ending. The end of the story, Martha and Jonathan Kent are murdered by Lex Luthor. Like it turns dark. Like it's like on a page. It's like everything is fine, and then you turn a page and it's dark.
It makes sense. I see. I get it. Nope.
No.
Nope.
And then Batman then decides he's going to take revenge, and he tries to murder Lex. And I have yet to be able to discover what the ending is because I don't actually own the issue. I don't know how it pans out. But I guess Superman has to stop Batman from murdering Lex Luthor.
Well, at
or
that
something.
point in time, yeah, it would be the whole moral thing. No, you can't.
I would assume, yeah.
You can't murder him, brother Bruce.
Killing bad.
Brother Bruce.
No kill.
Brother
Brother
Bad.
Bruce.
Isn't that a Disney movie?
I don't know.
Brother Bear.
Oh,
That's it. Yeah.
yeah.
Close.
Oh, you got it. That's it. Brother Bear.
Hey,
Okay.
Correct.
All
Good
right.
job, Smurphy.
Trivia.
So yeah, there's about 20 or so, maybe 30 or so of these imaginary stories that exist out there from DC from that time period.
Well, now correct me if I'm wrong,
And he will.
but wasn't, especially back then, leading up into the late 70s, early 80s, wasn't the fact that DC's continuity was so hard to understand because of all of these imaginary stories that one of the greatest comic book stories ever written came about.
In a sense, yeah, sort of. I mean, things were not necessarily confusing just because of the imaginary stories. Like, if you had just your regular continuity and then these side imaginary stories, that would be one thing. But at the same time, they also created their multiverse with Earth 2 and Earth 3 and Earth X and Earth P and Earth 3.4 and whatever.
Earth squiggly line.
And with all of these characters intersecting and jumping from universe to universe and going which way or this or that way, on top of the fact that there are these imaginary stories, that was confusing enough. As the lead up, the 5 to 10 year lead up to Crisis was heating up,
Yeah.
and they knew that they were going to have to do something to clean things, they started retconning again and incorporating these imaginary stories into actual continuity and giving
So
them
it did happen.
giving them multiverse number designations.
Oh.
Okay.
So
Surprise.
so suddenly these imaginary stories that don't mean anything, now they suddenly do, and they're connected, and you might see one in the background of a panel of Crisis or something. And then yes, of course, they did Crisis and kind of used that to redo the entire company. And it was at that time that they did their last imaginary story. And it is actually an official imaginary story, the famous Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by Alan Moore and Kurt Swan.
Yeah.
Kurt Swan did the Superman Batman Brothers too. He was kind of the Jack Kirby of Superman. So the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which I don't know if you guys have ever read it. It's amazing. I don't know if you're Alan Moore fans or not. I tend to kind of, I don't think he's necessarily overrated, but
He's right
He's
where he
rated.
should be.
He's rated.
I don't know that he's I don't know that he's quite as, I don't love him quite as much as most people do. Having said that, I've never read a bad book by Alan Moore.
Mhm.
And Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, I think, is one of his 5 best.
Okay.
It's a 2-issue story, and it basically what it did was it kind of ended the Superman run of stories up till that point before the relaunch that hit with John Byrne and Man of Steel. And so that kind of is where alternate What Ifs and Elseworlds starts, is that bracket of time of imaginary stories, which really, even though they did Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow in the 80s, it really just kind of ran in that 50s to early 70s time period and allowed writers to do something a little bit different.
Marvel fans ask, what if?
So with the introduction of Marvel in the early 60s, and keep in mind that at the same time Imaginary Stories is going on, Marvel obviously revolutionizes the game of comics completely, and they, starting with Fantastic Four #1, they end up bringing in a much more cohesive, collected continuity. If Spider-Man guest stars in Fantastic Four, at the end he swings off and says, "Oh, I got to go take care of whatever." And in the next issue of Spider-Man that comes out, he may make reference to, "Oh, that time I was at the Fantastic Four."
That was a fun mission with Brickhead and Flame Guy.
Yeah, right. And the
The living wall.
Brickhead.
Brickhead and Flame Guy.
Did you mean the living wall?
No, I meant the Thing and the Human Torch.
How did you not get that? How did you
Because
not
he
get that?
just had an adventure with the Fantastic
The
Four.
thing is made of orange rock, like a brick.
Like a brick.
And
Brickhead.
like an
the
orange
torch is
brick.
Fire everywhere, including his head. Flame
Fire,
head.
yeah.
There you go. All right, well, Pistol figures out that one.
You know, what this did is this created that hardcore Marvel fan, also known as a Marvel zombie.
Derogatory, but all right.
I'm offended by that.
I'm actually a little
Whatever.
That's actually what they called them in that first 10 years worth of comics. When you go back and you look through, they talk about the Marvel zombies. Those are Marvel fans.
The diehard Marvel fans that lived and died by the continuity were
Yep.
called Marvel zombies.
which is where that
Why don't you
term
call us like,
comes from.
hey, Marvel sluts?
I'm a hardcore Marvel zombie then because
Evidently.
Hey, nerds and losers of Marvel. What are you reading?
What this hardcore continuity did was it really allowed fans and creators to start asking that question of what if. You didn't have just, oh, this imaginary story where Superman splits into 2 beings. That's cool. This is more of, what if the spider did not bite Spider-Man? what if certain events in this very intricate and connected continuity happened differently?
Yeah.
Which is a deviation from what DC was doing with the imaginary stories. This actually plays on the stuff that you've read and learned and become a part of as a fan, and it really serviced the fans.
Yeah, it's how does this one tiny, or most of the time significant event change everything you know about this universe?
Like, what if Uncle Ben lived?
What
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What if Peter
As
Parker
opposed to-
bit thousands of spiders?
Well, yes.
Sure.
What if?
Sure. I
What
mean,
if
you can
spiders men.
Spiders men. Yeah. You can ask any what if questions you want. I mean, that was the thing about it. So when they came around, they finally started publishing actual what if books in 1977. Obviously, we have all read various what if books. I'm sure a lot of fans out there have bought various issues here and there. The What If series has actually run 13 volumes
Jeez.
That is-
over the years since
Wow.
1977
That's pretty
in
nice.
various forms.
Okay.
The first volume, I don't know for sure, but I want to say the first volume ran like 48 issues, 49 issues, something like that, and then had a one-shot, almost like an annual special. And that started, ironically, you brought this up earlier, that started with what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four. That is the first Marvel what if. And it does play off of Amazing Spider-Man #1. When Spider-Man goes and auditions for the FF and they tell him, well, we're Fantastic Four and we're a family and we don't pay anything. And he's like, all right, fine, I'm out. Well, in this, he goes and auditions and they end up taking him in. They end up agreeing to bring him in, and they are no longer the Fantastic Four. They are now the Fantastic Five. And then it pretty much plays out with all the major stories for the first year of both Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, only instead of Spider-Man going up against the Lizard, it's all 5 of them.
I was about to say, I can't imagine this going well for any of the
Any
spider
of the
foes.
or any of the FF. I mean, you've
Yeah.
got the top guys of the time.
Oh, Mysterio's so screwed.
Well, this
yeah.
this ends up leading up to Namor.
Okay.
And, you have that whole confrontation with Namor and the Fantastic Five and all that. And Sue gets kidnapped
Yes.
by Namor.
Abducted, sexually harassed.
That's a name.
By today, by keeping it current.
Wow.
Keeping it current.
Keeping it PC.
Because she's just straight up taken away by this hunky guy from the 7 Seas.
Only wearing his underwear.
Yes.
Only wearing his underwear.
And wings on his feet.
And she agrees to stay there because she feels she's being upstaged by Spider-Man.
Okay, well, that's stupid.
So, hey, I didn't write it. I just did the research.
Calm down, Pistol. Don't be so mad about it. The guy who can sling webs versus a woman who can close your throat with just a little bit of a thought.
She's put it forceful.
And give them a break. It's the first what if. They had a few bugs to work out.
Still,
Ooh,
that's
Spider-Man.
stupid.
I don't like you, Spider-Man. Stay here. Meh.
Spider-Man's more popular than me. Brush my hair under the sea.
Yeah, so she goes through like some sort of transformation and becomes an
Part
Atlantean.
Atlantean?
Mm-hmm. Yep, she becomes part Atlantean.
Sue
And-
Storm, you whore.
Time out.
I thought we were
How
going to
could
where
you
she
see-
turns into the dominatrix.
If she's invisible, how could you see her? How do you know that for a fact?
She's not invisible all the
Well-
time, Smurphy.
She can go back and forth.
Fair enough.
It's a choice.
Good. Oh, now it's a choice. I see.
It's always a choice. You always have a choice, listeners.
Always.
So yeah, so that's Volume 1. Volume 1 had a lot of stories like that, and it was a little creaky. Volume 2 is the stuff that we probably all grew up with.
I think I had the majority of Volume 2 for quite a while. Those were the ones that had the most interesting stories for me.
Yeah. And Volume 2, what they did was they kind of took stories from the original series even and kind of expanded them and changed them. The other thing they did is they would make 2 or 3 part issue stories. They would drag things out.
There was more continuity to touch upon, to play with. Unlike some of that earlier stuff, you're limited to what you could do with Volume 1 and Volume 2. The skies were the limit. All the major characters were pretty much introduced by then.
Well, yeah, I mean, it didn't start until like 88 or 89, somewhere around there. So
Yeah.
you had almost 25 years worth of,
Of what if possibilities.
of possibilities, right? And they also gave you multiple endings in some of them.
Oh, that's fun.
There were some that had, almost like Clue. Like, that's how it ended. Or it could have ended like this.
Or
Yeah.
If you didn't like that one, how about this?
It just didn't have Tim Curry running down the hall and, yelling at people.
So what other things did the What If line of comics give us?
Well, the What If books also ended up giving us things that you see now in comics today. Mr. X, I believe you are reading Spider-Geddon.
Yes, currently reading Spider-Man.
Currently
One of
reading
two people at the table.
I was going to say, Smurphy, Pistol, do you guys read Spider-Geddon? Did you read Spider-Verse? Do you read any of that stuff?
Yes, I actually did read Spider-Verse, Intro to Spider-Verse. I'm catching up on Intro to Spider-Geddon, and waiting for me at the comic shop would be Spider-Verse.
If you are reading Spider-Geddon, or if you've read Spider-Verse, you know the character of Spider-Girl, who shows up quite a bit. Spider-Girl actually premiered in a What If. There was a What If issue 105 from Volume 2 where Peter and Mary had a daughter, and she became Spider-Girl. And what that did was that ended up kicking off the MC2 line. So it was a whole separate alternate reality line.
Yeah.
I remember Kid Juggernaut and his
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, J2.
J2.
Well,
Yeah.
because all of their alternate realities were always so dark, they
yeah.
decided, well, why don't we do something happy?
But that's
Maybe make it to where the heroes actually do make a difference.
but the Spider-Man that was dark too because Peter Parker lost his leg. Or is that wrong? Is it a different one? That's one.
I don't
thinking of.
recall.
I
I
think he
don't-
had a
where it's
daughter
May
and he lost
Parker?
his leg.
No, he did.
He lost
Depending
his
on
I don't
which
recall.
Spider-Man,
whichever
and
one.
That's why
I think
she was doing Spider-Man or Spider-Woman. So.
I believe Smurphy is actually correct on this because there's a what else that continues on the story where Spider-Man has lost his leg and that's why he had to quit Spider-Manning, and that's where May Parker takes it up.
Spider-Manning.
Well, because the leg
And
went
that could be,
gripped
but
the
the,
wall.
Yes.
Like, the three
And that
elements
could be
would hit, and
in-
one leg would just kind of dangle.
that could be in the Spider-Girl series, because there was a whole series. I mean, she had her own book that spun out of that issue. So
Oh, yeah.
that stuff could have showed up in that book. I don't know. I never
I
read
just remember
it.
because
So.
that was dark. To me, that was dark. I was like, damn.
That is pretty dark, but yet at the same time, I'm sure it was handled with that same kind of light feel.
It
that,
was. I
and
mean,
what was
yeah.
it? Avengers Next or A Next or something?
A-Next
A
is
Next was the
what
other.
they were referring to the Avengers as.
And it was kind of like the first Ultimate. It was a separate line, but it came out of What If. And then since that series has ended, What Ifs are kind of regulated to events. So every year or two, we'll get another volume, and this volume is What If on Civil War. Or this volume is 5 issues that do What If of
5 different
Planet Hulk,
scenarios of what could have happened if this happened.
various
during
different
Civil War or Planet Hulk.
right
Yeah.
the
Or
events.
Siege.
Yeah.
Like,
or-
what if Civil War was handled by somebody who had a competent writing experience?
Oh boy.
Oh, that's right.
Shots
I
fired.
ever have to worry about that coming back to bite me.
You don't think Mark's going to listen to this? Is that
I talk to Mark every now and then.
Oh, do
and
ya?
He knows how I feel.
Call him Marky, whatever. It's cool.
He's got a funky
Yes, the
bunch.
restraining order really puts an exclamation point on your friendship.
That's not Mark, first of all.
The fact that you have multiple restraining orders among multiple people just
Okay, what happened between me and
I'm
Warren
frightened.
Ellis was a complete mischaracterization of who I am.
Did you understand any of it?
What?
What happened between you and
Warren
Marnell? Because I've never understood anything from him.
Let's just say that what he did with what happened between us launched his career with Next Wave. I'll use any chance I can to promote Next Wave. I love that book.
Okay.
Next Wave.
okay. It's our one per episode.
Yeah.
You don't get to mention it again.
And until we record again.
You've done it. You've done it. One per episode. With characters spawning out of What Ifs, were there any stories from What Ifs that actually came to be in actual continuity?
Yes. There were a number of things that have actually come to pass. Things that if you go back and you look at the old What If books, it was a what if at the time, but now we've had it in continuity. There have been things like, what if Bucky Barnes had become Captain America? Well,
Well, that
saw-
happened.
that happened. What if the Beast had continued to mutate?
Well, happened. Yeah, that kept on happening. Yeah.
It keeps on happening.
Keeps
It
on happening.
continues to happen.
Catman.
What if Jane Foster had found the hammer of Thor? Was
Well,
one of the issues.
Yeah,
Which,
that
what,
Yeah,
5 years?
5 years
she was-
she held the hammer. And
Yeah.
Lady Thor.
And most infamously, and I believe this was part of the very first volume of What Ifs, they actually did a What If Spider-Man's clone had lived. way before the infamous Clone Saga.
Yeah, well,
So it kind of sounds like Marvel's using What Ifs almost as like a testing ground.
Oh, could be.
Like,
Could be.
did this
Did
get
they like
received
this
well?
idea?
Let's carry on with it.
What do
Spider
fans
Girl,
think?
bring her in. Yeah.
Right. Oh, they hate it. Bail. Oh, they love it. Continue.
Yeah.
Maybe bring it in. It's kind of like Secret Wars, where they found what they liked, and then they found a silly reason to bring it into continuity.
It could be. Yeah. I mean, yeah, very well could have been. Yeah.
Listen, Ultimate Mysterio had a portal that connected to the 616. They could have just easily had Miles go through that and then be done. They destroyed worlds just so Miles can swing by and maybe give a wink and a smile to Spider-Gwen. Strange New Elseworlds.
By the time Crisis had hit, What If was going on, and that was fairly successful in the various different things. And that's when DC went to revisit the whole imaginary stories idea. And that's where you get Elseworlds. I don't know how you guys feel, even with What Ifs. I think of Elseworlds as the title for alternate realities. Like, whenever I think of things, I always think of it as an Elseworlds first. I don't know why. It didn't last that long, but it just seems like such a perfect word for it.
Yeah.
It blankets everything. What Ifs are Elseworlds.
Yeah.
It all, it just encapsulates everything.
Yeah.
They wanted to do, like they did with the imaginary stories, things that would stay completely out of continuity, but be self-contained completely. So unlike Marvel, they wouldn't necessarily play off of particular events and moments that would change. It would just be outside of continuity. We can do whatever the hell we want stories.
Right.
And this all starts in 1989 with Gotham by Gaslight, which is by Brian Augustyn and Mike Mignola from Hellboy. And obviously, for those who haven't read it out there, it is Batman versus Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper moves to Gotham after the fifth victim is found in London, and he continues to carry out what he's doing there. And
Of course, once you're done with London, you
go
gotta
to
come
Gotham.
City.
You got to go to Gotham.
And for those of our illiterate fans, it is currently on Blu-ray.
Oh, that's right, the movie. Yeah, I never
There
saw
is
the
an
movie.
There's an actual animated version of the story now. Yes.
DC animated is actually very good.
Yeah, that's true. I've never seen it. I really want to see that. Also, ironically, that book was edited by a young man who was starting out in the business at the time, and I think he had done a few things, and he was making his name, so he certainly wasn't unknown, but a young man by the name of Mark Waid
Oh, wow.
was the editor of Gotham by Gaslight, which I find interesting. So yeah, that's technically the first Elseworlds title, although it was retroactively called that. The first book to actually have the Elseworlds logo on it is Batman Holy Terror in 1991.
Now, what was that about?
The Crusades.
Kind of.
Really?
Actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, basically. I mean, it's Bruce Wayne becomes Batman to fight, corruption in a theocratic world. So it
Okay.
is sort of plays off of all of that. Now, I have never read it. I don't
For
know
your
anything about it.
hoity-toity
but,
bat readers.
Yeah, and that's the very first book to actually have that Elseworlds logo of the star and the word kind of circling around it.
Right, yeah.
Kind of a play off the DC circle and star. From there, Elseworlds became so popular that it ran from the 90s up until 2003.
Jeez,
When
okay.
they stopped doing it. So it didn't really run that long. What Ifs have been running longer. The Imagined Stories ran longer, but Elseworlds seems to be the title. It even had a whole series of annuals. I don't know if you guys were collecting in the mid-90s, but 1994, DC did a whole series of Elseworlds annuals. Every book had an annual that was an Elseworlds. In one of those cases where, as we said before, annuals don't matter, these didn't necessarily matter, but they also weren't necessarily throwaway either, because you were getting something different.
Right.
You were getting a full, complete story. And there are some really crazy ones in there. The one that I like the most, for obvious reasons, because I'm such a Western nut, Lobo Annual of that year was called A Fistful of Bastiches. And it's all assorted Western Lobo stories.
Does he run into Jonah Hex?
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've read that.
I'm actually gonna look this up because I love my.
That would be
Lobo.
cool. Lobo
That'd be
versus
a
Jonah
cool
Hex. That would
crossover.
be cool. They did a bunch of different things. There was the Flash annual. Wally was crippled, and he sells Barry's identity to a film studio or something like that. And
Seems like a dick move, but all right.
It does a little bit. I wonder how that plays out. One of the most famous ones was the Detective Comics annual, which is called Leatherwing, and it's Batman as a pirate.
Oh, wow.
I had that toy, yes.
Yeah, that's right. They made a toy of it.
They brought that idea back not too long ago.
Yeah.
Batman.
Yeah.
Back when Batman was traveling through time after
Right.
everybody thought that he was dead because
Yep.
Darkseid killed him with
One
his
eye.
Omega beams.
He
Yeah.
with one eye, not two.
Two is death, one is
Oh,
time
one
travel.
is time
power.
travel.
Oh,
Hey.
one is time travel.
That's the way it was in the book.
That's
I didn't
why you
write it.
don't want to get winked at
Right.
by
Darkseid.
Darkseid.
Yep.
I mean,
He starts flirting with you, you're going to travel through
A
time.
lesson to us all, fellas.
But you're still going to leave behind a skeleton with your bat costume, though.
Right.
'Cause, you know, that's a thing.
right.
I'm sorry. That was,
go on.
Just your identity. Goes.
that was rude of me. You can tell how jaded I am of pre-Flashpoint
Silliness.
silliness in DC.
A lot of the fans were. I remember at the shop, people were just like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, "I know."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
Sorry.
when those were coming. And actually, if you remember, at the shop, we had a ton of this Detective Comics annual
Yeah.
for the longest time. Now, they're from what I understand, they're becoming harder to find. These Elseworlds annuals. I don't know that for a fact. I haven't started looking, but yeah, from what I hear, they're becoming difficult to find, as well as the follow-up annuals 2 years later, when they did the whole series of what they called the Legends of the Dead Earth annuals in '96. So it was the same concept. Every book had an annual that was something different, but Legends of the Dead Earth was future stories. It could be 10 years in the future for that character. It could be 50 years. It could be thousands of years in the future.
Oh, wow, okay.
Just depends on what they decide to do. At the time, they certainly were not technically Elseworlds tales. I think since then they have retroactively said that is part of the Elseworlds line.
Didn't DC do a 1 million years later storyline too?
There
That was
was.
canon?
Oh, God,
That is
yeah.
canon, though,
So-
because that's characters from the year 1 million who come back, and it was like a crossover crisis event where they interacted with the characters of that time period, of the modern day at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, that is canon, whereas these aren't necessarily these Legends of the Dead Earth.
Well, just going back to like maybe using this as testing fodder, like, oh, let's see, 1,000 years from now. Okay, well, now
Again,
in canon, they
could
come
be.
1 million back. Okay.
Especially by the mid-'90s, especially by then, when you're trying to swamp the market as they were with everything at that time, it could have very easily been testing ground.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. We mentioned Spider-Verse earlier, and even though you mentioned Spider-Girl, the breakout character of Spider-Verse was actually the introduction of Spider-Gwen.
Ghost Spider, please.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now she's
Now,
going by
yeah.
Ghost Spider, but
What a
back then
terrible
it
name.
was Spider-Gwen.
Yes.
And I can guarantee you that had that one issue that she appeared in, the Edge of Spider-Verse, if people hadn't gone crazy for that character, she probably just would have been shuffled into the multiverse and maybe brought back for a story here or there. But because she's so popular, again, testing out new stuff, she became so popular. Well, of course we're going to give her her own book. But then you also get, you start Gwenizing everything, such as Gwenpool, Gwenum, and
Wolva Gwen?
Wolva Gwen, Nova Gwen, Vision Gwen.
X-Gwen.
I could go Gwen. I
You're
could
not
keep
even
on
trying
I
to
could go Gwen.
Hawk
I
Gwen.
could keep on Gwenin.
Hashtag
all
I
day.
could go Gwen.
I could go Gwen.
I mean, that's what
She is
Marvel
a
wants you to
blonde.
believe. But the real breakout star of Spider-Verse, and we're just going to side here, is Lady Spider, the steampunk Spider-Woman. She was the real breakout star to me. Carry on, please.
Okay, then. But yes, it could have been used as testing ground, and some of it has now worked its way into DC continuity, both pre-Flashpoint, 52, and Rebirth. Obviously, during Infinite Crisis, I think Smurphy and I were working together at the time that was coming out at the shop, and that was such a huge story, and it was almost as big as the original Crisis. Another retcon that DC does, because they have to do it every 5 to 10 years, it seems. And this time, they brought the multiverse back, then they destroyed the multiverse, then they created a finite multiverse of 52 worlds. And they comprised this...
Not really a multiverse.
Well, it is multi.
Multi.
It's just not infinite.
Right.
It's just finite
the,
now.
the finite multiverse.
It's the finite multiverse.
We're gonna have a
There's
finite
16
crisis.
places. Don't go to 17.
Right.
I mean,
That's the
kind of
Nazi
like
one.
is
We have a finite crisis
52.
here.
That's it. But they started pulling some of the more popular Elseworlds books and saying that they now inhabit various worlds. And some of those have stayed even through Rebirth. So yeah, they could have been workshopping things and seeing, oh, well, everybody loves Batman as a vampire. Let's make that this world. And Gotham by Gaslight is this world. And
Red Sun.
Red Sun is this
Sun's
world,
evil.
yeah. There was a brief resurgence in 2010 of Elseworlds. Dan Didio at DC wanted to bring it back and started with Superman, The Last Family of Krypton, where the entire L family escapes and
Oh, wow.
comes to Earth, and Jor-El is your focal character, and they're kind of like the first family of Earth or something. I haven't read it. I have no idea, but
And Jor-El was adopted by Martha.
yes, right, and grew up as brothers with Clark and Bruce.
Obviously,
yeah,
great.
before
Good
splitting
storytelling.
into green and red and blue, and yeah. But yeah, no, I guess the reception on that book was okay, but I guess it didn't sell enough, and Elseworlds has kind of been dead ever since.
Marvel's Alternaverse.
So the other thing that, I think is important to mention when you're talking about what ifs and Elseworlds is that Marvel and DC are always copying one another.
Right. Yes. Yes. No.
I'm
Come
sorry.
on. Don't
I'm
act
sorry.
like you're surprised.
All right.
Sorry
You know
to
it.
break it to you.
You
Yeah.
caught me. You caught me. I was feigning that. You got me.
Yeah, they're always copying. If Marvel has a success with this, DC's going to do it. If DC has a success with that, Marvel's going to do it. It happens all the time. And of course, it happened again with the Elseworlds stuff where Marvel wanted to copy. What I discovered was that they did actually start something of their own Elseworlds. It would be separate from What Ifs. It would be separate from their alternate realities that connect with everything, and it was called the Alternaverse.
It
And
actually had a name.
it actually had a name. There are only 3 books that I could find that were printed under that banner. Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe was an Alternaverse.
Yeah. Wow.
The Last Avengers story, if you guys have ever read that, which is a pretty cool looking book. I've never read it. It looks very cool.
Okay.
That's part of it. And the one that is my favorite and is probably the darkest is Ruins. Ruins is probably the most messed up Elseworlds What If Alternaverse story you've ever heard of. It's a 2-issue story. It's fully painted, and it came on the heels of Marvels. Did you guys ever read Marvels?
Yes, I actually know
Yes.
exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah,
I
it
have
was-
read Ruins. I
yeah.
literally read Marvel Into Ruins.
Into
Yeah.
Ruins. It was
Yeah.
a 2-issue series, and it is messed up.
That Wolverine Jean Grey stuff. That is, yeah. That's,
And
that
he's
thing
got
really
like
sticks with me.
the adamantium poisoning in his
He's
skin, and
always
he's just
like-
and he's
yep.
always scratching his hands. Yeah, it's like the major what if Marvel went on its ear, or came out of DC's dark multiverse. Like it is some ate up stuff. Banner gets hit by the gamma bomb, and he ends up turning into something that looks like Stripe at the end of Gremlins. After he gets hit with the water, and he jumps out of the water, and he's like pussing and
Yeah.
bubbling, and yeah, Banner looks like that and dies.
Yeah, it's Zack Snyder's Marvels.
Just put your crosshairs for everybody.
I actually wrote that down 2 days ago.
Been dying to use it ever since.
It's a fun read. It's a depressing as hell read, but it's a fun read. And I'm trying to remember. I think Professor X ends up becoming the president. He's President X, and Wilson Fisk is a warden of some. I don't know if it's the Raft or something like that. Some high-end prison that's where they keep all the mutants. Like Quicksilver had his arms and legs removed so that he couldn't move.
Jeez.
Warden Fisk had to remove Cyclops' eyes because they couldn't figure out how to stop the eye beams. So when he was, late teenager, they removed his eyes. And I mean, it is a dark, dark book.
But it is gorgeous.
It's beautifully painted.
Yeah.
It is beautiful, and it's yet a very different style from Alex Ross.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 that kind of fit under the Alternaverse banner. There are other books and miniseries that Marvel has done that you could consider Alternaverse. The most famous of those probably being Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe and Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe again.
Right. I guess you'd also think Earth X. Wouldn't that? I mean, because that's or is that more of an alternate future?
I guess that would be, I guess that would kind of fit under the Alternaverse thing because it hasn't ever, Earth X has never actually crossed over with anything.
True. Yeah, this is
It
true,
has
yeah.
kept itself separate.
It has kept itself. We've never gotten a character from Earth X showing up in present day Marvel,
or even just a
Yes.
random crossover like
Yeah.
Probably just never.
2099 did back in the 90s. Like, they just never crossed over.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess that would kind of fit. There were also things, did you guys ever hear of this series they were starting called the Millennial Visions?
No, would that include the Marvel Knights?
Marvel Knights had a Millennial Visions.
Okay.
Yeah. But there were 2 X-Men Millennial Visions. There was 1 Marvel Knights and 1 Marvel Universe.
I remember the X-Men ones, of course.
They were 1 pages, just a drawing of the team or whatever, and then a 1-page text synopsis of what the idea would be. And that's it. It was basically like a pinup book. But they were kind of what ifs. They were kind of the same idea. I did learn recently that apparently there were 2 or 3 of those worlds from the first X-Men one that the Exiles visited.
Okay.
Ooh.
So
No, that makes sense. That makes
so
sense.
it is kind of like their kind of continuity, but only like 2 or 3 of them, not all of them. So it's
Yeah.
weird. I'm not quite sure where all those kinds of books fit.
Yeah.
Well, it really
Just
doesn't
my
matter
theory.
anymore technically because the multiverse where Marvel is concerned is completely out of whack after Secret Wars.
After the Secret Wars.
After the Secret Wars, most of the multiverse has been destroyed. Part of it has been put back together by Mr. Fantastic and the Future Foundation and all of that, but it's still not what it used to be.
Right. But I mean, they're even creating new ones today. As recently as October of 2018, they did a Halloween special, the Avengers Halloween special, which was I think 5 or 6 stories.
I did not pick that up. How
I
was
did.
it?
I did. I picked it up. Some of the stories are good. Some of the stories are terrible. Just
Oh,
like
well.
you would, just like any of the What Ifs or Elseworlds. I
Yeah.
mean, some of the Elseworlds are amazing, and some of them are just crap. Same thing with What Ifs.
Aunt May was the Herald of Galactus. Fantastic.
Now, see, I would read that.
It was a good book.
What if Aunt May got bit by the spider?
I would read that.
Yeah.
I read the most recent
I'm gonna
round
kick your
of
butt and
What
bake
Ifs.
you a pie.
know?
What if Aunt May just stayed dead and they didn't ruin the Spider-Man? Anyway,
Which time?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Which time
fair
should she
enough.
have stayed dead?
fair enough.
So there are so many questions that can be asked with What Ifs and Elseworlds. But that's kind of the background that you're looking at of the history. It starts in 1942 and works its way up to now.
Well, you talk about questions. That's a perfect segue into asking the audience a question. Hey, audience.
Terrific. Simply terrific.
When it comes to alternate realities, are you an Elseworlds fan or are you a What If fan? Do you prefer unrelated but similar lines like Marvel's Earth X trilogy? Or DC's Just Imagine Stan Lee creating the DC universe? I remember those were fun. Or do you prefer your alternate realities to be more connected to continuity like Age of Apocalypse, Mutant X, or the DC Multiverse? Let us know. Head on over to our website at mybigfatpullist.com and tell us what you think.
Favorite Elseworlds.
So if we go down a list of kind of favorites, and I don't, these are favorites kind of compiled by various different sites I found online, and ones that are most famous, and then a few that I personally picked because
Right.
I thought they were cool. Obviously, number 1 is Kingdom Come.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
good. I read that and that one's pretty awesome.
It's a competent story with gorgeous artwork.
Yeah, that
Now,
Alex Ross
technically
painting.
does not.
yeah.
Now, I mean, is it considered an Elseworld story or just a alternate universe story?
That's a good question. Technically, I think it's alternate universe.
Yeah, it
Well,
might
alternate
be.
future, I
yeah.
guess.
You're right. No, but that's like they don't label. It's not labeled as Elseworlds.
Right.
Well, and it depends on what happened after the 52 and Rebirth, because when they did that, you remember that Kingdom? They did that Kingdom miniseries that came out that was like a sequel.
Yeah, I have them both.
Do you?
Yeah, on paperback.
I never got the sequel
Alex Ross hand painted all this, like every scene, right?
Right.
for
Yeah,
for the first one.
Yeah,
the first
oh,
one.
the
Yeah.
second one looked that same style. I guess they were drawn, but it's kind of that same style.
Well, the second one was like 5 or 6 different miniseries or one shots.
Maybe I didn't read it. Maybe I bought it and read it. But I definitely read the
Okay.
first one because I know I have them both at home.
And that second one, like, it basically said that it was another Earth
Right.
where all of this took place on, and they started to bring characters over. Like, I think the Kingdom Come Superman eventually ended up joining the Jeff Johns JSA run. Because he was older and he had the black. Yeah.
That's where the black uniform for Gray Cyberns first came from. Was that book?
Well, wasn't Kingdom Come Superman part of Infinite Crisis?
Yeah, he was the one who they showed flying in.
No.
with Superman. Are you
No,
Or is it
Infinite.
just old man Superman.
That was Superman from Action Comics #1.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we can get into that when
I know,
we go
I'm with
into
Mr.
the
X
whole
a lot of that,
history.
too.
Yes, we're actually there would be an upcoming episode of us touching on multiple timelines, alternate futures, and things like that. Be on the lookout for that episode because it's going to blow your mind.
It may even end up being a multi-parter.
Because it is
Because
massive.
it's
there
it's
are
a pretty
so many
huge
stretched out
yeah.
over comic book history. It's not even fun.
But yes, no, the Superman in Infinite Crisis was a Superman from Action Comics
Okay.
#1.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel smarter. I've learned something.
So yeah, so I don't know. I guess you're probably right. Kingdom Come probably would be considered, but I don't know if that world survived after
They don't talk about it.
Flash. They
It's
never
not
do.
mentioned, It's not talked about.
It's
ever.
their
Sorry,
Earth X.
it's 53.
They're like, it's
It's
there.
yeah,
That was
Sorta.
Earth 53, and we can
Right.
only afford 52.
right.
The one we don't talk about.
Just didn't make it.
And then there's Smurphy. I think you brought it up. I think it was you. The Superman Red Sun, where Kal-El's rocket crash lands in the Ukraine, and he becomes a USSR hero. I've never read it. Did you read it?
I did not. I think I flipped through it at the shop.
Did you?
That was it.
No, you
Heard a
know
lot
what?
about it.
Honestly, I think I have because also Batman's in there and he's got the hat.
Yeah.
So I have read it. I thought it was a fun Elseworlds.
I've heard it's pretty good. I've
Yeah.
never actually read
Yeah.
it. My favorite, again, not a big surprise, is the Justice Riders, which is the Justice League as
Cowboys.
kind of like the Magnificent Seven, only as the Justice League. One of the most famous ones is something called JLA the Nail. Now, I've just bought this. I haven't read it yet. They did 2 of them. They were 3 issues each, the nail and then another nail. And the premise of this was, in 3 issues time frame, retelling the history of the DC Universe as if the Kents never picked up the baby. They couldn't because the car ran over a nail and they had a flat tire.
Oh.
So this one nail has altered the events of DC forever because there is no Superman. Now there's still a Kal-El who is picked up by authorities, from what I understand, some sort of probably like a Star Labs or Cadmus or somebody like that. But like I said, I haven't read it yet. But it sounds very interesting to see a DC world where he is not the front runner superhero that gives everybody hope. I don't know if that's Batman or Wonder Woman or
I would assume Power Girl.
You would assume Power Girl.
I would assume Power
Yeah.
Girl.
Over Booster Gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elongated man.
All right,
Stars and
Green
Stripes.
Lantern had his due, but it's time.
Stars and Stripes all the way.
Then there's the Vampire Trilogy, the Batman Vampire Trilogy, which is Red Rain, Bloodstorm, and Crimson Mist, where Batman has become a vampire
Yummy.
to fight Dracula. Because
To fight a
that's-
monster, you must be
I guess
a
so.
monster.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Should have been a Frankenstein instead.
One of the best ones, if you guys can find it, is called Speeding Bullets. And that's the one where Kal-El's rocket crash lands in Wayne Manor. So the Waynes never have a baby. They raise this little adopted alien baby as their son Bruce. So it's Kal-El in the alley when the parents get killed. So if you figure you're a 5 to 8-year-old kid in the alley and you just watched your parents get gunned down and your powers manifest,
That dude's dead.
he fries him.
yeah,
Yeah.
that dude's
Yeah.
He
toast.
fries him. So he's Batman. He wears the Batman costume, but he
But
has
Superman
Superman's powers.
That's cool. That's a cool concept.
Yeah, it's a very cool book.
Very cool.
Batman the Darkest Night. That's where Abin Sur crashes in Wayne Manor,
Okay.
and Bruce Wayne gets the ring.
Huh.
That I think the
Bat
Guardians.
Lantern.
Yeah, the Guardians end
had
up
that
giving
figure.
rings to Superman, Flash, and Wonder Woman, and basically the Justice League become the new Corps or something, if I remember right.
Could have done worse.
The Golden Age, which is the JSA's probably most famous Elseworlds, where it deals with kind of the end of the JSA era and the end of the 40s going into the 50s and McCarthyism and all this kind of stuff, and it the demise of the superhero.
Okay.
It's supposed to be a very famous. The one that I am most interested in reading, and Mr. X, I think you might be interested in this one as well, is what I call the silent film trilogy. There are 3 books: Superman Metropolis, Batman Nosferatu, and Wonder Woman the Blue Amazon. and all three are connected. They all play off of the silent films.
Yeah.
So obviously Superman plays off of Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which was the inspiration for calling his city Metropolis anyway.
Right.
Batman is both the cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu mixed together with Batman.
Oh, that's cool.
The Wonder Woman one is the Blue Angel and Dr. Mabuse the Gambler. Now, I haven't seen either of those films or even know those films, but
No, I'm completely lost in this whole bit.
yeah, I don't. I've never read any of them, so I don't know how good they are. There are a lot of various different Elseworlds, and obviously we don't have time to go through all of them.
No,
but
of course not.
But you do. You out there.
The person who doesn't have headphones listening on a subway.
Yeah.
Not our favorite kind of person, but as long as you're listening, we'll like y'all the same.
And we want to know, what are some of your favorite Elseworld stories? Are they any of the ones that we've listed? Or are they some of the ones that we did not list? Head on over to our website and let us know.
Favorite what ifs?
Obviously, with 219 issues, we can't go through all the what ifs. We can't mention all of them. I've not read all of them. I'm sure someone out there has read all of them. I don't know. I picked the stuff that looked most interesting to me, or the things that I've read most recently and most fresh in my mind.
Right.
One of them, I think somebody actually mentioned this earlier. Maybe Smurphy or Pistol.
I'm sure it was Smurphy. He's really good at topical things.
Yes.
Is he?
No.
How dare you?
What if number 19 was what if Peter Parker had stopped the burglar? What if he had saved Uncle Ben, essentially? He ends up becoming a celebrity.
And they've used that several different times.
Yes.
In House of M. House of M.
House
is a
of M
perfect
went that way.
example.
Yep.
Peter continued to be the celebrity that he was starting to be. He just wasn't an asshole about it. And he stopped the burglar, so Uncle Ben was never killed.
I think,
of course, Uncle Ben died of old age. But he still had
Right,
with
all
great
year.
power
But
comes great payday.
I think there was an issue of the volume What If Volume 2 that did the same story, that expanded on it. I mean, they do that one all the time.
It's an easy one to go to the well to.
Right.
Another easy one to go to the well to is what if Gwen Stacy had lived?
Mm-hmm.
Big question. Always want to know what could have been.
Did she become Spider-Gwen? Did she become Ghost Spider Ghost, whatever?
It's such a terrible name.
Wolfie Gwen.
With such
Wolfie
a
Gwen.
good story and great background character.
Well, when
she-
you really think about it, if she would have lived, she would have stayed with Peter. But would she have stayed with Peter? I mean, did she have the staying power that Mary Jane had?
Well, I mean, she would
When
have
it
had
came-
Norman's kid.
I will tell you.
Terrible Spider-Man canon.
I will tell you what happened
Oh,
if she did not die.
Please.
Because she doesn't die in that moment, but during that time, Osborn knows who Parker is. Peter and Gwen go off and get married. In the meantime, Osborn sells Spider-Man's identity to Jameson, who calls the authorities, and then Gwen and Peter live on the run for the rest of their life. That's how the What If book did it.
wow.
That's not right. He doesn't want Spider-Man arrested. He wants pictures of Spider-Man.
There was a little bit of a Jewish
You made
sound.
It was weird to
Jameson a
transition
little
to
too
that.
Jew.
I brought him in at the end.
Bring me the Spider-Man and a bagel.
Some locks.
There's one that I've always thought was interesting. I've always wanted to read. What if the new X-Men had died on their very first mission?
This was actually my very first What If.
Really? Volume 2, number 9.
Volume 2, number 9. Because of the cover. The cover
Sure.
is oh man. And we'll have pictures to most of these issues that we talk about over on our Facebook, our Twitter, and our Instagram accounts if people want to check them out. The cover is just, it's Professor X crying and screaming out in agony of he's killed all of his students, and there's a giant memorial behind him, and you've got Beast pushing him in the wheelchair, and it's just so heartbreaking. So I'm like, oh my God, what happened? So I bought it. I ended up buying it, and instead of everybody getting off of Krakoa before it's shot into space, nobody gets off the island. So the original X-Men and the all new, all different X-Men, all of them shot up into space to save the world from Krakoa, the island that walks like a man. So what happens is that Xavier is just completely beside himself. He can't handle it anymore. But a new generation of mutants is being formed, and it ends up Some of them are New Mutants characters like Wolfsbane. Beast leaves the Avengers to come back and help Xavier, and they form a new pseudo team of X-Men, just not the X-Men you know, because it's a what if.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Scared you, didn't I?
So now my favorite what if, and probably I think the first what if I ever read, was number 11 from Volume 2, which is what if the Fantastic Four all had the same powers. It's 4 different stories.
4 different stories.
And in each story, like in the first story, they come back from the mission and they can all stretch.
They're all stretchy.
Okay.
And in the second one, they're all invisible. And the third one, they're all on fire. And just how it affects things as it goes. The fourth one was the one that always messed me up, though. They come back, and of course, the Thing is the Thing. He looks like the Thing. The other 3 turn into Thing-like creatures, except Sue, who, for some reason, turns into the Man-Thing. Even though that makes no sense whatsoever, but she looks just like the Man-Thing.
She's made out of grass.
And she, yeah.
Because she is a female, she
Right.
doesn't turn into rock, she turns into
grassy
moss and
dirt.
grass.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but what if that happened?
But what
Well,
if?
apparently she can't talk, and they end up just living in the swamp together, the 4 of them. Like, they just go off and live in the swamp
Like
with
Shrek.
her. It was really
Like
weird.
Shrek.
Just like Shrek with Donkey. Great job. Let me just piggyback
Yeah.
off that. One of my
Yeah.
favorite what ifs is, what if Doctor Doom became the Sorcerer Supreme?
Oh,
I
yeah, that's a
remember
great
that one.
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that too. Yeah.
I read a couple of them, but none more stick with me than that one because of the ending moments. And spoiler alert, it's Doctor Doom, in his quest to save his mother, becomes a Sorcerer Supreme. And I know what you're asking. Well, what about Stephen Strange? What happens to him? Stephen Strange, when he shows up with his hands broken, Doom lops off his hands and gives him Doom hands, robot hands to work better at surgery. And in the end, shenanigans, obviously, as there are to be, Doom dies fighting Dormammu. And the surgeon who's operating to try and save Doom but ultimately fails is Dr. Stephen Strange. But because he has mechanical hands, he is unable... Well, that's not the reason why, but because he has mechanical hands, he's not able to have fingerprints, which is why Doom, with his dying breath, tells all the Doombots in the area to abduct Strange, put the mask on his face, overwrite his brain to turn him back into Doom, and then that's where it ends.
Jesus.
Doom's like, plan number 6 to stay alive forever.
Wow.
I'll just overwrite Stephen Strange's whole life and Doom
And
is
take
back,
over.
baby. Yeah.
Wow.
Kind of a superior Spider-Man thing going on
Yeah.
there, in a sense.
Yeah. Superior Doom.
Interesting. Superior Strange.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always wanted to read that one. That's a classic
sorry.
cover
It's got a
of
great
him
cover.
Yes.
Yeah. Great
standing there
cover.
with his... Yeah.
Which is weird because he actually doesn't really fight them. They're actually more allies because in this, I guess, Doom really never has the explosion to hate Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah, but you see that's
Well-
that's why the covers are all those things that always
Yeah.
I would
grab
say
you.
you gotta...
Yeah.
In fact, the next one that I was going to have on the list is a completely misleading cover. I just read this one in the last couple of days. I had never read it before. It's number 69. What if Strife killed the X-Men? So it's a play on how the Executioner song plays out.
Okay.
Right. See, this is one I've never read.
I just read it recently, and it starts off pretty interesting. You know, I mean, the first couple issues of Executioner's Song are still pretty much how things go. And then it starts to deviate. And I say it's misleading because, yes, Strife kills, I think, maybe 2 or 3 people in it, but really it's the virus, the legacy virus,
Right.
ends up killing Charles
Okay.
in it.
Oh.
And
Okay.
as a result, the X-Men are pissed at Apocalypse because the legacy virus didn't work. It didn't help the problem. It didn't solve things. So they end up starting a huge fight with them, with Apocalypse and his crew. Meanwhile, there's Sabretooth and a bunch of others that come in, and they're starting shit on a 3rd level that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I was like, why are these guys coming in? I don't get this. But what happens is, throughout the story, Apocalypse essentially kills everyone during the battle.
As he
Cable, as he would, and Cable ends up convincing Strife to switch sides. So at the end, Strife and Apocalypse kill each other in battle, and then Cable takes over running the X-Men, and it's basically members of X-Force and X-Factor are the new X-Men, plus Rogue and Gambit. Everybody else is dead.
Gotta have that Southern Belle.
So it was an interesting what if, and it was interesting the way things played out. But seeing as how the cover says, "What if Strife had killed it?"
Yeah.
That's not exactly what happens.
Yeah.
In the book.
See, I don't like this. I don't like the misleading titles.
Yeah, I mean, the literal purpose is a what if, so it's like, well, what if Apocalypse killed the X-Men? Would have been just as good.
It would have been just as interesting, and you
Yeah,
could have
right.
you wouldn't have had to change anything.
Yeah.
I remember one of the other big ones that I always loved was what if Legion had killed Magneto
Yeah, instead of
Xavier.
Yeah. Negating the Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah. And it creates a bizarre world where mutants are not feared and hated ever. And X-Men are celebrity superheroes just on the same level as the Avengers and the FF. Eventually, Apocalypse does show up and starts laying waste to things, but because events did not go the way they did before, there was no Magneto, so there was no attack in issue 1. So eventually, as they grew up, Jean and Scott retired, and they, raise a family in the mountains of Montana or Colorado or something. And Wolverine never joined the X-Men. I'm not quite sure why that affected it, but he never joins the X-Men. And at the end, having joined this anti-human resistance force that was building, and I'm not quite sure why he was there. And also, it looked like Charles, who had died earlier in the book, was leading this new brotherhood, I guess, almost, with Gideon, and I forget who else was there.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was a very strange book, and it's certainly not how I would have played things out, but interesting nonetheless.
I always enjoyed because they did it both ways. It was what if the Hulk had killed Wolverine during their their classic first meeting, and then of course there's always the flip side one as well. What if Wolverine had killed the Hulk? Those were always fun books. But another one that is very kind of misleading is, and this is before they had the 10-year anniversary for Age of Apocalypse, there was a what if issue. What if the Age of Apocalypse continued? And the story was just so that they could get Galactus to come to Earth. Because now it's Galactus.
I mean,
the coming of Galactus, only it's the Age of Apocalypse universe.
I'm kind of interested in a fight between Galactus and Apocalypse. That sounds like a
but
fun
the
fight
thing
to
is
me.
that the art was so horrible you couldn't tell what was going on.
Yeah, I remember that.
Could not
It
tell
was
what the hell was
very
going
tough to
on.
figure out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that really doesn't seem like a what if scenario. More of like a hey writers. You know what I mean? That
It's
really,
more of a what else.
yeah.
Like what else
can we
happened
do?
after
Yeah,
Age
thank
of
you.
Apocalypse?
That's a better way of
Yeah.
saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, you guys already hit all the ones that I liked. The only
Okay.
one you didn't make is, for whatever reason, sticks in my head is what if Civil War. I don't know why it stuck in my head. I know it was what if like
That was
They
one
were
of
like-
that was one of the event ones.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
like 4 or
Yeah.
5 different
Right.
scenarios.
but the
for
cover,
that.
the cover was stuck in my head because it was Iron Man in the armor holding Cap's shield, and you were just like, and it was like, what if Iron Man's team won, like just flat out won, and it was like, hey, registration's going into effect.
Oh.
And so like it was kind of a cool read. And so that cover was always burnt in my skull, where I was just like, man, like what if that happened?
And
that would
that's
flip things
the
around.
thing about what ifs. It's those covers
Right.
covers of the things that really grab you and make you go, "Ooh, I've asked
I
this
wanna know.
question.
Yeah.
I want to know."
Yeah.
I want to know what love is. What?
Yeah.
Saying?
Well, what else could we ask you, the audience, to tell us? What are some of your favorite what if stories? Let us know. Head on over to the website. Go to Facebook. Go to Instagram. Maybe try the Twitter. Everybody loves the Twitter. Let us know what your favorite what ifs are. Outside of Elseworlds and what ifs.
So there are a small handful of Elseworlds books. I don't think any of these fall under the what if banner, but there are a small handful of of Elseworlds books that are company crossovers. Obviously, there's been lots of company crossovers. Marvel and DC,
The Amalgam
DC and
universe,
Image, Amalgam ended up doing... Yeah, like there's lots of different ones. But
some of them actually have
an
Elseworlds
Elseworlds
tag.
logo, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Batman Captain America one
Yeah.
is the one that I remember the most, where it's in the 40s, and they fight in World War II together, and, Cap gets frozen, and when he thaws out at the end... He's greeted by Batman and a new Robin, and it turns out that Grayson has grown up and taken over as Batman, and Bruce's nephew is now
Robin.
I don't know where Bruce's brother came from or sister to give him a nephew, but his nephew is now...
I think we already established that Superman is his brother.
Oh, that's right.
So,
Yeah. So that's where it comes from, yeah.
Superman, Batman.
Brothers. The Daredevil Batman crossovers are both Elseworlds.
Okay.
Both of them are Elseworlds books, the DC one and the one that Marvel printed.
Huh.
Because the one is a sequel to the other, even though I think the Marvel one doesn't actually carry the Elseworlds logo.
Okay.
But those are Elseworlds. But even with Dark Horse, Batman and Tarzan is an Elseworlds. It's not just a crossover.
Huh.
It is an Elseworlds. Superman and Tarzan is an Elseworlds.
So what about Batman and Spawn?
Or
That is
Batman
not
versus
an
Aliens
Elseworlds.
and Predators.
No, those
Not-
are not Elseworlds.
those
I
are
mean,
not Elseworlds.
if
That's
these
fair.
are
Those are
in
not
my
officially
yes,
Elseworlds.
right,
They're
We're
crossover.
all doing. You can't
Yeah,
see. We're all doing.
We're
quotation marks.
all doing air quotes.
It's great.
Like a bunch of hipsters.
You're here with us.
The last one that was done that is a official Elseworlds book, but is a crossover, was Planetary meets JLA, Terra Occulta, which
okay.
I never read. I was a huge fan of Planetary, loved it. I don't know why I missed out on that for some reason, but I'm very interested in checking it out.
Well, I mean, I guess what you really can do is any of the crossovers, whether they be good or bad, you could always consider them a part of the Elseworlds concept. Because I've read a lot of great crossovers that are not a part of the Elseworlds.
Green Lantern, Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I think they did 2 of those.
There was Green Lantern, Star Trek. Hell, they did Star Trek Planet of the Apes.
That's right. They're doing Star Trek Transformers right
Star
now.
Trek
Yep.
Transformers.
Didn't they do Star Trek X-Men as well?
They did.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Here's an interesting one that just popped in my head: Invincible Spider-Man. Because if my memory serves correctly, Invincible, it's canon in his universe, but in the Marvel universe, it's not. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where Invincible shows up?
Invincible showed up in one issue of I want to say the last or maybe second to last iteration of Marvel Team Up. Because it was being written
That's
by
right.
Robert
Yes.
Kirkman.
I forgot about
Fair
that.
enough.
Robert
Yes.
Kirkman
I
was
forgot about
writing
that,
a
yes.
book.
Okay.
And yes, you are correct. Invincible does show up in the Marvel universe
Make fun of us.
for that one little section.
Yes.
But it also ties into his own book because he was traveling throughout alternate universes trying to get back to his world because he was fighting a bad guy whose power was to travel the multiverse and steal
I remember
technology
his head.
So, while not officially a what if or even an Alternaverse, kind of is the same kind of concept. then.
Yeah, basically.
What do
Well,
you know?
I think we've had a lot of knowledge dropped on us today. I'm looking forward to actually digging out some of my old what ifs and Elseworlds. I hope you at home are eager to go through your collection, or maybe head out to the comic store and look for some of the older stuff. If you want to try the newer stuff, go ahead. That's your decision. But I don't think it does not get better than the classic stuff. Go for that Volume 2 stuff, folks. But until next time, unless somebody else has something else to say,
I just want to say to remember to all the people going out there that comic stores are essentially libraries. Please feel free to take your time and read all the comics in the store that you can. Everybody loves that, and they love you for it.
and I hope by now any listener who has stuck with this show knows that anything that comes out of Pistol's mouth is absolute crap. So until next time, I'm Mr. X.
Pistol danger.
I'm Smurphy.
And I'm Dr. Impact.
I will see you next time.
That's our show, folks. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe on the podcast listening app of your choice.
What he means is download and subscribe on every app possible.
Have comments, questions, suggestions for future shows? Reach out to us at our website at mybigfatpulllist.com.
You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Until next time, keep your web fluid sticky.
Your batarangs sharp.
Ouch.
And your space guns charged.
That's not a space gun. That's Megatron.
Doctor Strange's new Elseworlds. Yeah?
Those are not the words that I want you to say, though.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of Ghostbusters riffing it, you know. Thanks, Mr. Feig. Favorite what ifs?
Nope. See, that was a question.
Favorite what ifs?
Don't know what you're doing there.
Giggly now. Favorite what ifs?
Nope.
It's too hard.
You know, the thing is, though, is that you said it perfectly before you had to compose yourself, so I'll just use that one.
Or you can just be like, favorite what ifs?
Favorite what ifs?
No, you don't. Favorite what ifs?
Favorite what ifs?
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Give the governor harumph.